All right, welcome to this episode of Photo Theology. I'm your host, Doug, and today we are going to be looking at the Pentax K5 II versus the Pentax K5 IIs in an image test. Now, I've been asked a couple times, well, actually not just a couple times, but by quite a few people, to compare these cameras. A lot of people, they like the Pentax models. They like the K5 II, they like the K5 IIs, and they honestly don't get the difference in the price. They don't understand why should you buy one over the other. The other thing is this, is that a lot of people have been drawn to Pentax in terms of evaluations of things like that based off of other camera models, such as when you saw us put the Pentax K5 II versus the Nikon D800E, and how the Pentax K5 II just utterly crushed that thing. But there were also a couple of other cameras that crushed it too, so I'm not going to just say, hey, Pentax was the way to go there. There were quite a few models you could have looked at and got better results. In addition to that, you had the newly Nikon D7100, which utterly got obliterated by the Pentax K5 IIs. You had the situation where you had the Canon 5D Mark II, or sorry, not 5D Mark II, but the 5D Mark III, which once again, for the money, it couldn't beat the Pentax K5 IIs. And I could go on and on and on. The biggest things, though, that you can look at is you can look at the Pentax K5 IIs and you can compare it to the Nikon D4 and the Canon 1DX. The fact that those cameras cost, considerably thousands and thousands and thousands more, and they do not deliver a better image anywhere close for the money. In fact, they're not even twice as good or anything like that. Really does draw people back to this concept of, hey, you got two Pentax models here. Which one should I go with? And which one should I not go with? Now, here's what I'm going to say. There are slight differences between the Pentax K5 II and the K5 IIs. There's a slight difference. The difference on paper is one has an anti-aliasing filter, the other one doesn't. Now, the Pentax K5 II has the traditional low-pass anti-aliasing filter that's part of it. The Pentax K5 IIs does not. Because it does not have that anti-aliasing filter, or the low-pass anti-aliasing filter put into it, what happens there is the camera itself actually does produce a sharper image. Now understand, the concept of the sharper image is not based on quote-unquote resolution, but it's based on the fact that the lens, in correlation with the image sensor, in correlation with the imaging processor, is able to produce a more natural image that is not digitized when it is fully cropped. That is the idea behind this. And the truth is, yes, it does work. So there you go. Now, both cameras are using the Sony sensor, which is 16 megapixels, which Sony uses in some of their models. Nikon used in their D7000. So they're using a sensor, and they've actually, you could say, perfected the sensor technology with their Prime 2 imaging processor. Keep in mind, there's nothing in the Canon assortment that can touch the Prime 2 imaging processor if everything is even. Keep in mind, Nikon's Speed 3 imaging processor doesn't even come close to touching the Pentax Prime 2 imaging processor. The only imaging processor that one might say can overtake the Pentax imaging processor is Fuji's Real imaging processor. But that's about it. So, I've also been asked about lenses, and I'm going to get into lenses here because I think that's going to be the main bulk of what I actually want to talk about in this conversation with you guys. Many people, they are geared towards the Pentax after seeing the results, and they say, hey, I want to buy this, but, what kind of lens assortment should I, invest in? I've been a long time Nikon user, or I've been a long time Canon user, or I've invested in Olympus, or whatever it is. I've got to reset my lenses, of course. What do I need to do to make it happen? Well, Pentax has a very interesting setup. The first thing is this, is that with Pentax you can use old 35 millimeter film based lenses, or you can use digital based lenses as well to interchange with the camera. Now, if you do use old 35 millimeter film lenses, sometimes what you will need to do is simply just get an adapter. Now, if you get the adapter, like for example an M42 type lens, because I like to use those lenses with my Pentax K20D, the Pentax will give you an autofocus assist, which is pretty cool. They've been doing this since my K20D day, so I can tell you for a fact it works. And I've taken some of my very best photos, or some of the photos that I consider to be overall my best and most enjoyable photos, with my M42 type lenses. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to go out and get some M42 type lenses just because I said that, along with a $12 or $15 adapter to put it to your Pentax. Understand that doing something like that is a very crude way of actually shooting with the camera. In other words, although you have an adapter, that adapter just doesn't go hook, line, and sinker on there. You gotta twist it in there, and then to get it out sometimes isn't always the most pleasant thing. Now, I think over time they've developed better adapters for M42 type lenses and for other styles of lenses as well, such as like Leica, and so on and so forth. But with that part being said here, that's not how I actually would tell you to venture with the Pentax. If you want to get K-mount, traditional K-mount film based lenses and put them onto the Pentax and use the autofocus assist, then I'd be all for that. I would tell you that's perfectly fine as long as you want to do a manual focus. Now, if you have been looking at these reviews, and if you are trying to utilize like the autofocusing speed that's a 0.1 below, because you want to have that mechanical robustness that utterly trumps a Canon or a Nikon. The only thing that can match a Pentax at this point in time is a Fuji or a Panasonic in terms of mechanics of autofocusing speed. Then you're going to have to go with some auto-based lenses. That much is true. There's no two ways about that. I started off with a 16 to 45 f4 lens, and it has done me very, very well. The way Pentax actually breaks down their lenses is they have two main classes that you will be able to identify with. And in the way that they do it, they break it down in a concept of speed. Now, the speed is primarily the aperture. So Pentax will normally have for their general lenses a f2.8, and then they will also have an f4.0. This is how Pentax deals with their lenses. So in terms of mechanics, both styles of lenses will roughly be, I want to say, pretty equivalent. But the real difference that you're going to have there is going to be the level of light intake and the level of sharpness. So a while ago I told you guys there were three types of lenses that you could look at whenever buying a camera. One is an economy lens, one is a valued lens, and then the other one is a performance lens. Okay? Or I might have called one like a value lens, a performance lens, and a premier lens. Alright? But you get my point. It's like a good, better, best kind of deal. Alright? If you're going with the f4, that is going to be a performance lens or a value lens if you want to look at it from that terminology. Basically what you're going to get is you're going to get excellent mechanics for the money. You're also going to get good, solid image quality for the money. What you're going to lack, though, is the low light shooting capability, which will in turn impact on low lit situations. So understand, that if you go with the 2.8 based model of a lens, you are definitely going to get a better performance from that end. Now, this doesn't take into account the concept of having like a 50 prime or a 70 prime or anything like that. Prime lenses are prime lenses, macro lenses are macro lenses, or macro primes, things like that. I'm talking in terms of like starting off with a general suit here, okay? So if you wanted to go with Pentex's 17 to 70 millimeter lens, f4, that is an excellent lens to go with. Great mechanics. Also has really nice focal length. It is a very solid, baseline lens. If you want to go with their 16 to 45, that's what I did. Once again, has a really nice wide angle to it, has a very nice standard, in fact. f4, great lens. If you want to go for low light shooting performance, don't kid yourself, you just better go get that 16 to 50 millimeter 2.8 lens. It will not let you down. It will not let you down. So that, however, is going to run you basically the price of the camera, though, if you do that. So if you want to get like a K5 II or a K5 IIs and you want to get a 16 to 50 2.8 lens, it's going to run you roughly around, I want to say, 25 to 3 grand. That's what you're going to be looking at there. In all honesty, though, keep in mind, having a lens assortment like that, starting off, gives you premier, because it is a premier lens, it gives you premier quality. It gives you professional quality. The level of sharpness, also low light control and mechanics and all the above, are going to start right from the get-go. And that's the thing that you have to keep in mind when you're looking at changing over or investing into a brand new camera system, is the way you accessorize it. In accessorizing it, how does that actually impact your experience of what you're really going after? So one way you could look at this is, if you're on a budget and that 100 or 200 could possibly break you, then it might make more sense just to go with the K5 II versus the K5 IIs and get the better lens versus going the opposite route and getting a worse lens. Now, one thing I am going to say is that even if we were talking about the 18 to 55 weather resistant kit lens, you will have, I want to say, a certain degree of good mechanics with that lens, but quite honestly, the image quality is just not there. One of the big disservices that I do find when I check reviews online about these cameras is that for some reason everybody is willing to give a Canon or a Nikon a like $1,300 lens to shoot with, like digital camera resource page. The guy who does that, he's like, oh, here's the L 70 to 200 millimeter f4 lens, and then and that's what he does for Canon, and then he turns right back around and says, well, with Pentax I was going to use the 50 to 135, but now I'm not going to do that here. I'll sit up here and use this 55 to 200 millimeter, that's only worth like $300. And then you get the impression that the Canon is better in its low light shooting because they took a $500 camera and stuck a $1,300 lens onto it. Now, in fairness to all of that, there have been times when people have switched up their lenses and they have gotten better results. For example, Digital Camera Resource page, before he went over to DP Review, his K01, he used the Pentax 5135. If you are looking for a portraiture lens and you want something with great response time, great clarity, great dependability, you cannot beat that lens. I have met so many people who have invested in Canon and Nikon, and what will happen is they'll start shooting portraitures and they'll get more serious about it, and they invest in the full frame body and all that nonsense, and then they come across to me and say, hey, you know what, Doug, I need a lens. I've been looking at this Sigma 105, or I've been looking at whatever, and then I'm like, okay, fine, And then, I'll be talking to them, and I said, well, here are some of the downfalls to, the Sigma lens. For example, you have a level of noise distortion with that lens in terms of shadows and stuff like that. Really doesn't play off well in terms of dynamic range and those kind of things. And then what I'll do is I'll say, these are the kind of pictures you want. And I'll, show them some pictures. And they'll be like, awesome. What kind of lens is that? And then I'll be like, oh, this here is the Pentax 50 to 135. Yeah, you remember when I told you that you should have bought that Pentax when you bought that Canon? Yeah, well, here's the reason why. Now look at you. You spent $3,000 on a body, and you're looking for a lens that's like 1,000 plus. But the problem is you can't find that lens in the way that you want it because the manufacturer that you didn't invest the money into actually has it. See, that's how it works. So I'm one of those guys who really doesn't mind actually, putting it to somebody after I told them that, hey, you should have went this route, and then they said, well, I've heard other stuff, and then they go another route, and then they try to come back to me after the fact. I'm one of those people where, where if you decided to go the other route because someone else told you something else, then you go to them to get the rest of your stuff too. Don't waste your time talking to me about stuff. But the Pentax 50 to 135 lens is an excellent lens. Now, I will say this. As far as lenses go, I will not discount Sigma or Tamron. I want to make that clear. Tamron has excellent lenses. Their issue is very simple. Their autofocusing capability is just not that impressive. So understand, Tamron will actually maximize on sharpness. Their 24 to 75 Pentax lens is phenomenal. It is absolutely, positively phenomenal. Same thing with their 70 to 200 millimeter lens. 2.8, and both of them are 2.8 by the way. In terms of sharpness, are absolutely, positively phenomenal. I will take those two lenses and I will put them up against any Canon L series lens with a Pentax body. Okay, backing the Tamron lens, of course, any day. You take a Canon full frame and you give the Canon L lens the best L lens with that focal length in mind, and it's on. I have no problem taking a Pentax equivalent with a Tamron lens, one of those two, and going out to battle because they do an excellent job. For the price of what you will spend, you will never make it up in image quality. It will never happen. Now, you do have Sigma. I will say this about Sigma. If you are looking for longer telephoto lenses, that's where you go to Sigma. Sigma has mechanics. They have longer telephoto lenses. They're a little weaker on, the image quality in some cases, but that is understandable because Sigma actually builds their lenses off of the Foveon system, which is actually very different from the Pentax system or the Canon system or whatever other system you want to talk about. But there is Sigma. Like I said, longer telephoto zoom lens, you go Sigma if you're not looking to go Pentax. And also, if you're wanting to have great mechanics, but you really just don't have the money to invest in a higher Pentax unit, then Sigma is the alternative. Take a hit on the image quality, get the mechanics that you need, and then there you go. For your stock lens, you got the Sigma. Ergonomically, Sigma lenses are built incredibly well. I love the way those lenses feel in my hand. I even loved using them when I was using the Sigma DS14. So, I'll definitely be the first one to tell you that Sigma does make a nice, a nice lens. They do. But in the end, it depends on what you're going after. Pentax lenses are a very fine medium between performance in terms of mechanics and image quality. If you're trying to lower the price, then you go with Tamron if you want to go with the image quality. Or you go with Sigma if you want to go with the mechanics. That's how that's pretty much going to play out. But as far as the lenses go, for a kit lens, you really want to look at getting like a 17 to 50, or you want to end up getting a a 16 to 40. That's what you want to have as your basic kit lens. That's exactly what you want to do. You always want to have a prime in there, like a 2 or below on the f-stop. So if you're a person who wants to have like a macro lens, then get like the Tamron macro lens. That's a 60 millimeter f2, and that can be your prime lens slash your macro lens. You can use it for portraiture and all that fun stuff there. Or you can always just go with the traditional 50 millimeter 1.4 if you want to do that. So it will really just come down to what you're going after, what you're trying to shoot, that kind of thing. But in terms of investment, you really don't want to have a kit lens. That's the main thing I'm going to tell you here. For those people who are wondering about lenses, do not go with the kit lens. And for the love of God, do not go with the 18 to 135 lens that Pentax makes. Those lenses suck. Also, don't go with the 70 to 300 millimeter $200 lenses. They're nothing but crap. They're junk. It's totally true. However, the Pentax 55 to 300 millimeter lens for 430, that lens is actually really good if you're talking about a telephoto. Now, to be realistic with you, if you do really want to have a telephoto, and if you've got the money, just break down and get like a 120 to 400 or a 120 to 500. Okay, yeah, it's going to cost you about $1,000 and some change, but guess what? 300 millimeters has never been enough, from my experience. 400 millimeters is where it's at. Now, if you decide you want to go for better image quality, then what you simply do is go with a 70 to 200 millimeter, like Tamron lens, pop a multiplier on there, like a ×2 multiplier, and get your 400 millimeters that way. That's normally that's how I like to do it. So, there you go. But, in the end, it's to each their own when it comes to their gear based on what they're trying to shoot with. Basically, I'm just going to give you guys a couple rough ideas. You might be wondering, why didn't I really talk about the cameras in this case? The reason why I didn't talk about the cameras in this case is very simple. They're both the same damn camera. That's why. And I keep on getting asked questions about lens assortments and stuff like that for these cameras, so I thought I would do that for you. So, with that being said, you guys take care. I hope you liked the review. All right.